Okay, let's try this again. My camera failed when I was trying to check something. Um, but anyway, as I was saying, there is a video that I was watching here on YouTube, recommended to me from Corridor Crew. Shout out to them, and they did a great and they did a great job. Mainly their lawyer, one of their contributors, lawyers, if you will, did a great job in explaining what happens in 9 days. Now, what's funny is when they did this video, they put the thumbnail on there with the number of days remaining until this moment happens, and every day, for every day that passes by, I should say, for every day that passes by, they kind of update the thumbnail. Basically, they go from like 9 to what it would be like, 8 tomorrow, then 7, and so on. So mainly, mainly they did a video talking about how in less than 9 days, actually 10 days or 11 days when they uploaded it, but 9 days today. And basically less than 9 days, this version of Mickey Mouse will be going into public domain, the Steamboat Willie version. And maybe, as well as the Steamboat Willie version of Minnie, if you will. So both, the Mickey and Minnie and even Pete, but I think Pete's already in public domain, or at least that version is, or the Alice version of Pete is in public domain, but the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey, Minnie, and Pete will be going into public domain along with the cartoon. Now, now what's interesting is how he explained, how this will occur, because you would think, oh, Mickey Mouse, or at least the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey and Minnie and Pete going into public domain, oh, that opens up all kinds of possibilities, right? Not so fast, because they did a decent job in explaining how trademarks are going to come into play, possibly, and basically how Disney, essentially, as I just checked something there, without incident, this time, but they basically explained how Disney is now at this position to where Mickey Mouse is still the core essence. He's still the core essence, the heart of what made Disney, of what Disney was built on. But the Steamboat Willie version of him is just a very, very itty bitty fracture of that build. Like, for example, you take, let's say this version of Mickey, and he's more significant, he's more important than, Steamboat is. You take this version of Minnie for the 100 years that I have behind me, if I can get her out real carefully, or maybe not. But basically, you've seen Minnie in the 100 birthday outfits that they have for her, right? And everything. Basically, this version of Minnie has more significance than her Steamboat Willie one. That's what I'm trying to say. And then, of course, like I said, the one that they did for 100 years, they get it out. This one also has more significance than the Steamboat Willie one. As I fix stuff here, hold on for a sec. Just kind of fix some stuff. That's what happens when you move stuff around. You gotta, readjust it back to what it was. But anyway, what I'm saying is that they have more significance, at least, in the terms of importance. They have more significance in the terms of importance than the Steamboat Willie ones, and that's kind of what they were pointing out. Pointing out at in this video that even though it should be something that Disney could be fighting for and should be fighting for like they've done previously, because they even talked about the fact that in the past, Disney back like in the mid 70s were the ones that were basically responsible for that first act, the first copyright act being put into play, because if they had not done that, then the year I turned 5 years old, 1984, would have been when Steamboat Willie, the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey, would have gone into public domain. But they got something taken care of to where they extended it for another like 20 years. But even when that happened, they had another act, the Extension Act, as it's called, put into play, to where whatever copyright acts that would have expired, let's say around 97, 98, basically, well, actually not 97, but but actually like 95 or something like that. I got to go back and watch the video, and I will link it here at the end. But basically around the mid to late 90s, any copyright that would have expired in 84 that got longevity up to 95, 97, you know, if it wasn't for this new Extension Act being put into play, they would have expired. Those copyrights would have expired in and around like 95 and 97, 98. But that didn't happen because again, Disney basically had another act put into play, and it wasn't just Disney. Here's the key factor: it wasn't just Disney behind the lobbying of the Congress and the houses of passing these bills. It was other studios that had properties that were going to fall into public domain had they not done something. So it wasn't just Disney, but Disney was at the forefront. So long story short, they get the Extension Act made to where it's going to be, instead of up to, I would guess what would it be, like 75 years, it got expanded another 25, and by being expanded another 25, it went to 95 years. It went to 95 years, thus meaning that after 95 years, anything, that was made before the 1970s and everything would become public domain. This is why Winnie the Pooh last year, went into public domain, and we got Blood and Honey, and why we're getting Blood and Honey 2 this upcoming year, because Tigger, who got introduced into the Winnie the Pooh universe, goes into public domain as well. So he's freed up to be utilized, any way people want to use him. And the same could be for other characters that will come into play later on. Like I think Kanga and Roo are going to be, I think, next on the list, and so on. And there's a lot of other characters that are on the verge of public domain. Pluto, Mickey's dog, goes into public domain, in about what, 2.5 years. Donald goes into public domain in 7 years. Goofy goes into public domain in 4.5 years, and so on. So a lot of first appearances of these characters are going to be hitting public domain, before the decade mostly is out. Before the decade is out. And right now, Disney is not doing anything, just like they're not doing anything to protect Steamboat Willie this time around. Disney's not doing anything to protect these other copyrights, although they may, as time goes on, depending on what happens within the company. They're not doing much to protect them. And it opens the door, essentially, for people to utilize these characters. But again, there's a catch, and that catch is the trademark. The trademark they have on Steamboat Willie, the trademark they have on the first appearances of Pluto, Donald, and Goofy, and so on. It's the trademark. So that kind of makes things a little tricky and difficult, in its own right. So even though the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey, as well as any incarnation around that time, is on the verge of public domain within the next few weeks, him, Minnie, and Pete, and all that, it's not as easy as it's going to be, like with Winnie the Pooh and such, to be able to utilize him in any creative way for profit or independence. But yeah, I do recommend checking out the Corridor Crew. They do a better job of explaining this. And until next time, guys,